London, a city synonymous with wealth, opportunity, and global influence. If it were an independent nation, its economy, valued at around $652 billion, would rank as the 22nd largest in the world, surpassing countries like Argentina and Sweden. This metropolis alone contributes nearly half of the UK's GDP, despite housing only a third of its population. But what if we looked beyond London's glittering skyline? Remove its economic output, and the UK's living standards would drop by 14%, placing it just ahead of the poorest US state, Mississippi. This stark contrast between London's prosperity and the rest of the country reveals an unsettling truth. The UK has seen better days. Over the past decade, the nation has faced mounting economic challenges. Real disposable income, what households have left after taxes, has stagnated or declined. Homelessness has reached alarming levels, with more than 1 in 50 people in London experiencing it firsthand, giving the UK the highest homelessness rate in the developed world. Projections suggest that British households won't regain pre-pandemic income levels until at least 2027. How did a country that once led the world in industry and innovation arrive at this point? What hidden factors are driving this decline? And what does it mean for the UK's future and its citizens' lives? We'll delve into the critical decisions that transformed the UK's economic landscape, the repercussions of shifting from manufacturing to a service-based economy, and the long-term impacts of events like the 2008 financial crisis and Brexit. By uncovering the complex interplay of historical choices and global events, we'll shed light on the challenges facing the UK and explore potential paths forward. The UK's economic transformation is a cautionary tale of unintended consequences. What critical decision propelled Britain from manufacturing giant to service economy leader, leaving it more susceptible to global shocks? This shift reshaped the nation's economy and redefined work and prosperity for millions. In the late 20th century, the UK pivoted from manufacturing to a service-oriented model, emphasizing financial services. Initially hailed as modernization, this transition had far-reaching implications for economic stability and the social fabric. The move away from manufacturing accelerated during the 1980s through the early 2000s. Traditional sectors like heavy industry and mining, especially outside London, suffered significant job losses. These industries were replaced by a growing service sector dominated by finance, business services, and technology. At first, this seemed successful. GDP grew and London flourished as a global financial hub. However, underlying structural issues emerged that later contributed to economic vulnerabilities. One significant consequence has been widening income inequality. Since the 1980s, the Gini coefficient has shown a persistent increase in the gap between the wealthiest and poorest. The service economy, while lucrative for some, failed to provide the broad-based employment opportunities that manufacturing once did. The concentration of economic activity in London created a stark regional divide. The capital now generates nearly half of the UK's GDP, while other regions struggle. This imbalance has made the UK one of the most regionally unequal countries in Europe, with prosperity largely confined to the southeast. Over-reliance on financial services made the economy more vulnerable to global shocks. The 2008 financial crisis exposed the weaknesses of this model. While all economies were affected, the UK's recovery was particularly sluggish due to its dependence on finance. The focus on services also came at the cost of innovation in other sectors. The UK's productivity problem has been compounded by a workforce skills mismatch. Many young people are inadequately prepared for high-skilled service jobs, limiting economic growth potential. Alarmingly, as of 2023, observers note that outside London, much of the UK's economy resembles that of a third-world country. This underscores the depth of regional disparities and the failure of the service-oriented model to deliver nationwide prosperity. The transition also had profound social implications. The loss of manufacturing jobs eroded traditional working-class communities, leading to disillusionment and disconnection. This social fragmentation has political ramifications, fueling populist movements and skepticism toward globalization. While the UK grappled with social upheaval, an economic tsunami was about to hit. What single policy response to the 2008 financial crisis had such far-reaching consequences that it continues to impact millions today? The government's reaction to this global event proved a critical turning point. The 2008 financial crisis exposed the vulnerabilities of the UK's service-based economy, particularly its heavy reliance on the financial sector. As global markets tumbled, the UK's banking system teetered on the brink of collapse. revealing the risks of an economy overly dependent on finance. In response, the government implemented austerity measures starting in 2010, aiming to reduce the budget deficit. These policies entailed over $30 billion in cuts to public services, welfare payments, and housing subsidies. While intended to stabilize finances, the long-term consequences have been severe. Austerity's impact on households has been substantial. Real household income declined, leaving many families financially vulnerable. Projections suggest that this strain will persist, with households not expected to regain pre-pandemic income levels until at least 2027. This prolonged hardship has exacerbated poverty and inequality. A visible effect of austerity is the deterioration of public services. The National Health Service, NHS, has faced chronic underfunding and increased pressure. Since 2014, waiting lists for treatment have more than doubled, rising from 3 million to 7.4 million patients. This strain affects quality of life and has broader economic implications due to reduced workforce productivity. Lack of investment from austerity measures has rippled across the economy. Outdated technology and reduced innovation contribute to the UK's productivity puzzle, a persistent lag in productivity growth compared to other developed nations. This gap hinders economic recovery and growth, creating a cycle of underinvestment and underperformance. Critics argue that focusing on austerity rather than stimulating growth has entrenched poverty and suffering. The rise of food banks underscores this trend. By 2015, the largest charity was distributing over 1 million food parcels annually, a figure that has continued to grow. In 2022, the UK witnessed the largest increase in absolute poverty in 30 years, with 12 million people living in absolute poverty. The combination of the financial crisis and austerity accelerated the UK's economic decline. While other nations invested in recovery, the UK's focus on deficit reduction came at the cost of economic stimulation. This approach led to stagnation, with rising inflation and sluggish growth becoming hallmarks of the post-2008 economy. The legacy of austerity continues to hamper recovery, even amid new challenges like the COVID-19 pandemic. Public services, already stretched thin, struggle to cope with increased demand, leaving the UK less resilient and less equipped to respond effectively to each new crisis. As the UK struggled to regain its economic footing, a seismic political decision loomed. What if a single vote could alter the course of a nation's economic future? The Brexit referendum of 2016 presented such a scenario, promising sovereignty but delivering uncertainty. This pivotal moment reshaped the economic landscape, amplifying existing challenges and creating new obstacles. The Brexit vote resulted in a narrow 52% majority favoring leaving the European Union, driven by promises of increased sovereignty and economic independence. Proponents argued that breaking free from EU regulations would allow the UK to forge its own path. However, the economic reality unfolding after the referendum paints a different picture. One immediate impact has been the significant reduction in trade openness. Unlike other major European countries that rebounded in global trade, the UK stands alone in decline. This contraction has far-reaching consequences, particularly for manufacturing, which has seen goods trade fall by 10.5% compared to pre-Brexit levels. High productivity sectors relying on integrated European supply chains have been hit hard, undermining competitiveness. Brexit-induced uncertainty has also hurt investment. The Bank of England estimates that Brexit reduced investment by 25% during the 5 years following the referendum. This decline hampers productivity growth and innovation, weakening the UK's economic position relative to European counterparts. A significant and unforeseen consequence is the impact on the labour market. Tightening labour supply has led to widespread shortages across sectors, complicating recovery efforts. This shortage is a structural challenge threatening long-term productivity and growth. The economic fallout from Brexit is compounded by global crises like the COVID-19 pandemic and the energy crisis. While these challenges affect economies worldwide, the UK's position outside the EU makes it particularly vulnerable. Reduced access to EU markets and labour pools hampers recovery efforts. As promised benefits fail to materialise, disillusionment has set in among many voters. Economic isolation from this political gamble has made the UK poorer and less competitive, according to many economists. This disenchantment is reflected in rising poverty levels, with 1 in 5 adults and 1 in 3 children now living in poverty, a situation worsened by rising costs and stagnant wages. regional implications are stark, exacerbating the north-south divide. While London and the southeast have weathered the storm relatively well, other struggling regions have seen economic prospects diminish further. This growing regional inequality threatens social cohesion and undermines efforts to level up the country. As regional disparities widen, a concerning trend reshapes the UK's economic landscape. What if the nation's brightest minds are quietly slipping away, taking with them the potential for future growth and innovation? This silent exodus threatens to compound economic challenges, potentially accelerating decline on the global stage. The brain drain phenomenon has become increasingly prevalent, with skilled professionals and talented graduates pursuing opportunities abroad. This exodus of human capital depletes the country of individuals capable of driving innovation, productivity, and growth. Economic factors play a crucial role. Stagnant wages and rising living costs make other countries more attractive to ambitious professionals. For example, a junior professional in New York can earn more than double their London counterpart, despite living costs being only about 33% higher. This disparity in earning potential and quality of life motivates relocation. The widening gap between the UK and European neighbours exacerbates the issue. In 2007, the average UK household was just 8% worse off than peers in northwestern Europe. By 2022, this gap expanded to a record 20%. This growing disparity reflects economic struggles and catalyzes skilled individuals to seek better prospects elsewhere. The implications are profound. Research indicates that those leaving the UK are significantly more skilled than those entering, creating a net loss of talent. This skills imbalance affects productivity and growth as the country loses individuals crucial for innovation and competitiveness. A visible manifestation is in the technology sector. The UK's struggle to keep pace with technological advancements is evident. For instance, automatic car washes have declined by 50% from 2003 to 2018, while hand car washes increased by 50%. This shift symbolizes underinvestment in automation and technology, limiting competitiveness in high-tech industries. The housing affordability crisis further contributes to the brain drain, especially among young adults. Homeownership has become increasingly unattainable, often requiring significant financial support from family. This lack of housing security pushes talented individuals to countries where earnings translate into a higher standard of living and financial stability. Statistical analysis reveals that the UK has some of the lowest productivity levels in the developed world. This gap is linked to a skills mismatch in the workforce, exacerbated by the brain drain and the fact that many young people are not engaged in education or training. The result is a workforce lacking skills necessary to drive growth in a competitive global landscape. Moreover, the UK faces unprecedented economic inactivity, with 11 million people not participating in the workforce. This disengagement, coupled with the loss of skilled professionals, creates a perfect storm, undermining economic recovery and future growth potential. The UK's economic decline stems from a complex interplay of factors: the shift to a service-based economy, the 2008 financial crisis and austerity measures, Brexit, and an ongoing brain drain. These interconnected issues have eroded the nation's economic resilience and global competitiveness. The UK now faces unprecedented challenges, including low productivity, regional disparities, and a widening skills gap. The housing crisis and strained public services compound these problems, creating a cycle of economic stagnation that's difficult to break. Despite dire circumstances, recovery is possible but requires a fundamental reassessment of economic priorities and a commitment to long-term strategies. Addressing structural weaknesses through increased investment in infrastructure, education, and innovation is crucial. The UK's path forward demands a renewed focus on fostering sustainable growth and rebuilding resilience in an increasingly competitive global landscape.